Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter 9. Close the door. Chapter entitled Brahma's Prayers for Creative Energy. Text number 23. Esha prapanna varadoram ramyatat Esha prapanna varadho ramayatma shaktya. Esha prapanna varadho ramayatma shaktya. Yad yad karishyati grihita gunavatara. Yad yad karishyati grihita gunavatara. Tasmin svavikramam idam srijatopi cheto. Tasmin svavikramam idam srijatopi cheto. Idam srijatopi cheto. Yunjita karma samalam chayata vijhayam. Yunjita karma samalam chayata vijhayam. Esha prapanna varadho ramayatma shaktya. Yad yad karishyati grihita gunavatara. Tasmin svavikramam idam srijatopi cheto. Yunjita karma samalam chayata vijhayam. Esha prapanna varado ramayatma shaktya. Yad yad karishyati grihita gunavatara. Tasmin svavikramamidam srijatopi cheto. Yunjita karma samalam chayata vijhayam. Esha prapanna varado ramayatma shaktya. Yad yad karishyati grihita gunavatara. Tasmin svavikramam idam srijatopi cheto. Yunjita karma samalam chayata vijhayam. Esha prapanna varadho ramayatma shaktya. Yad yad karishyati grihita gunavatara. Tasmin svavikramam idam srijatopi cheto. Yunjita karma samalam chayata vijhayam. Word for word, Eshaha this prapanna, one who is surrendered, varadaha, benefactor, ramaya, enjoying always with the goddess of fortune Lakshmi, Atma Shaktya, with his internal potency, Yat Yat, whatever, Karishyati, he may act, Grihita, accepting, Guna Avatara, incarnation of the mode of goodness. Tasmin, unto him, Savikramam, with omnipotency. Idam, this cosmic manifestation. Srijataha, creating. Api, in spite of. Chetaha, heart. Yunjita, be engaged. Karma, work. Samalam, material affection. Cha, also. Yata, as much as. Vijayam, I can give up. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, is always the benefactor of the surrendered souls. His activities are always enacted through His internal potency, Rama, or the Goddess of Fortune. I pray only to engage in His service in the creation of the material world, and I pray that I not be materially affected by my works, for thus I may be able to give up the false prestige of being the Creator. Purport: in the matter of material creation, maintenance and destruction, there are three incarnations of the material modes of nature, Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshwara. But the Lord's incarnation as Vishnu, in His internal potency, is the supreme energy for the total activities. Brahma, who is only an assistant in the modes of creation, wanted to remain in his actual position as an instrument of the Lord, instead of being puffed up by the false prestige of thinking himself the Creator. That is the way of becoming dear to the Supreme Lord and receiving His benediction. Foolish men want to take credit for all creation made by them. Foolish men want to take credit for all creations made by them, but intelligent persons know very well that not a blade of grass can move without the will of the Lord. Thus, all the credit for wonderful creations must go to Him. By spiritual consciousness only can one be free from the contamination of material affection and receive the benedictions offered by the Lord. Om Gyanatimarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadhati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dheena Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukum karoti vachalam bhangum langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande shigurum devataramanam diyatharivam. Hare Krishna. So we are coming to the conclusion of Lord Brahma's prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for the potency to create or to be the secondary creator of the universe. This whole third canto began with the conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. And Vidura asked about the creation of material existence. And we hear a bit about how the Lord manifested from himself, his internal potency, came the external potency of Maya. And from that external potency, Prakriti, Mahatattva, Pradhan, Prakriti, and so on and so forth, manifest in the way that we can perceive, such as the demigods, the senses, the sense objects, material elements. But although everything was there, all the resources were created by the Lord, still it wasn't able to come together, combine, and to work together with one another. So the Lord then entered into the universe himself as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu and glanced upon material nature again for it to activate along with the time potency. So once that happened, it's mentioned that from the navel of the Lord finally came a lotus flower and Brahma had appeared. And when Brahma appeared, Brahma's purpose was to be the secondary creator, or as they say, the original engineer of the universe. The resources did not come from Brahma. The resources came from Krishna. But Brahma just used those resources to create the universe, as we see the 14 planetary systems. So before he even did all of that, created the bodies for all the living entities to enter into, which will be an interesting part of the next chapter, how different bodies were manifest, how Brahma created different aspects or different living beings, bodies for the consciousness of different living beings, and how he gave up his consciousness in that particular stage, and the living entities entered into that sort of environment. So for example, the Rakshasas took up the dusk, thinking it to be a very beautiful woman. So in that way, Lord Brahma manifested different situations for living entities to exist and to enjoy their senses. So the whole point living entities take up material bodies is to once again resume their material desires. Because it's mentioned previously that they were lying dormant within Vishnu. So once the universe is in its ready state, then Mahavishnu lets them out. He wakes them up and says, remember, you wanted to be a dog? Here you go. Here's an opportunity to be a dog. So in this way, the Lord provides different opportunities for living entities. Therefore, Prabhupada says Krishna is so kind that even if you have a pinch of material desires, He's ready to fulfill them. Why? Not for the sake of wanting to see you suffer in material existence. Rather, He wants you to get rid of all distractions so that you'll engage in His service wholeheartedly without any distractions. Ahoituki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. Because that's the actual peace. That is the actual satisfaction the living entity will achieve. By engaging in the service of the Lord, ahoituki, without any cause, without any ulterior motive, and apratihata, without any cessation, so without any disturbance. If we perform devotional service with these two things, continuously and with no ulterior motives, and the only motive is anukulyena Krishna anusilanam, yes. So Krishna anusilanam, that is for the purpose or favorable, anything favorable performed for the Lord. Then we can understand that we're performing devotional service, and naturally, yayatma suprasiditi, the heart or the self will be naturally satisfied. So this is Lord Brahma's whole purpose of praying to the Lord, because he wants to understand his position as, Prabhupada says here, Brahma is only an assistant in the modes of creation, wanted to remain in his actual position as an instrument of the Lord, instead of becoming puffed up by the false prestige of thinking himself the creator. So Lord Brahma is praying to the Lord so that he may remain a servant of the Lord. Now we often hear of different pastimes of Lord Brahma. For example, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's mentioned that Lord Brahma, our Chaturmukhi Brahma, the four-headed Brahma of this universe, went to visit Krishna in Dwarka. And when he went to visit Krishna in Dwarka, then he came across the two doorkeepers. And the two doorkeepers told Brahma to state his purpose and who he was. And so he told them, I'm here to see Lord Krishna. Tell him Lord Brahma has come to see him. And Krishna, being omniscient, understood that four-headed Brahma of the universe had appeared. But he wanted to show him some mercy. So he then told his guards that, ask him which Brahma. And so when the guards came and asked him, which Brahma are you? Brahma was immediately bewildered. Because there's only one Brahma in the universe. And he knows how much he struggled to create the universe. You understand his position? His position is that he was the original created living entity. He's Swayambhu. He is the original person, or the original, rather Krishna's Adi Purusha, but he is the original living entity that was created or given a body in the material universe. So then it's mentioned that he spent one whole lifetime meditating, trying to figure out who he is, meditating on the Gayatri Mantra. 1,000 of his own years. That's mentioned as 8.6, I think, trillion. 8.6 trillion years. That's a whole lifetime of Brahma. He spent meditating, trying to figure out Krishna. And it's mentioned at the end of that lifetime, he was able to take darshan of the Lord. And the Lord was so kind to him that he gave him another full lifespan to be able to perform devotional service. So we can take a lesson from that incident that we should be ready to expend this lifetime for Krishna's service. Prabhupada tells Bhakti Charan Maharaj that you have spent so much time in material world satisfying your desires in so many different life forms. At least give this one life to Krishna. At least give this one life to Krishna. So our mood is to give everything, all that we've got. Give it your all. Everything we can. We will slip, we will trip. We have our own ulterior motives that we will attend Bhagavatam class, waiting for Mahaprasad. We will, so many different, hands up already. We have so many different ulterior motives that we give class for pride and prestige, for followers. We desire respect, adoration. All of these insidious beasts within the heart, they lurk within the darkness. So therefore the process of Krishna consciousness is meant to cleanse the heart. Cheto darpana marjanam. So we engage in devotional service with that mood. That we're here to serve Krishna and that we want to give it our all. And just as a parent sees the child struggling, but wanting the child to succeed will assist the child, in the same way, Krishna, he is extremely merciful to the conditioned souls. And just seeing a small step forward towards him by the conditioned soul, he takes many, many, many steps towards the living entity. And in that way, the reciprocation of the Lord is so great that the living entity is able to achieve love of Godhead very easily. Of course, that is not possible unless one takes shelter of a pure devotee of the Lord. But I'll come back to that. So we're meant to give it our all. And Lord Brahma did. He gave it his all. One whole lifetime he gave it to Krishna, meditating on the sound of the Gayatri Mantra. So this is Lord Brahma. So naturally he'd be confused. What is he talking about? Another Brahma? There's other Brahmas? And then Brahma was so confused. He just said, what do you mean other Brahmas? And so Lord Krishna let him in. And at that time he saw Lord Krishna sitting on a throne in Dwarka. And Lord Brahma then paid obeisance to the Lord, his shining helmet touching the lotus feet of the Lord. And Krishna asked, so Brahma, how is everything going? Everything going well? And Lord Brahma said, yes, this such and such is happening, all by your mercy, my Lord. But I have a question. And what is your question? You were mentioning before that which Brahma? But I am the only Brahma. And so immediately the Lord manifested before him the many, many millions and trillions of Brahmas from all the other universes. It's mentioned that our four-headed Brahma is in charge of this smallest universe. And there are many, many trillions of other universes. And in each of those universes, they are much, much bigger than ours. And therefore the Brahma has many, many more heads to manage the whole universe. So it's mentioned that when Brahma was sitting there, he suddenly saw all the Brahmas from all different universes appear. And along with all those Brahmas appeared all the different Shivas in those universes. And as Lord Brahma and these Shivas had appeared, they began worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But here's the thing, each Brahma could not see the other Brahma. So each Brahma thought that I am the only Brahma before the Lord. Each Shiva thought I am the only Shiva in front of the Lord. But our four-headed Brahma was standing there, shocked, seeing all the other Brahmas and Shivas. So then they all paid obeisances and they came before the Lord. What can we do for you, my Lord? Why have you called us here? What service can we engage? And Lord Krishna mentioned, I just wanted to see you all, now you may all go. And so all the Brahmas disappeared. And our Lord Brahma stood there shocked. And then he understood how insignificant he was. So the purpose of this instruction was not to put Brahma into illusion, but rather to instruct us, to help us understand that actually we are just insignificant living entities. Another example, Tamal Krishna Maharaj mentions when he was in LA and he was managing the temple at that time. He was the temple commander. And Prabhupada called him into the room. And Prabhupada told him, just see this whole cosmic manifestation. This whole cosmic manifestation, there's there's universes coming from the pores of Mahavishnu. And in this universe, which is covered by many, many layers of the modes of nature, or by the elements of nature, there is this there's 14 planetary systems. And in this 14 planetary systems, there's this Earth planet. In this Earth planet of the many, many countries, of the many, many lands there's this land of America. And in this land of America, there's a place known as California, Los Angeles, right? And so he says, in Los Angeles, in the city of Los Angeles, there's this road, there's this boulevard, La Cienega Boulevard. And in this boulevard, there's a church that has been renovated, and now a Hare Krishna temple. And in that temple, there's this one Tamal Krishna, and he thinks he's so big. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj was saying he felt like this, and he felt this small. The point is that we are this small. We are insignificant living entities in the whole creation of material existence. If you want to go one step further, we're simply part of the 1/4 of the rebellious living entities who've left the spiritual world, which is the other 3/4. So it's kind of like 3 against 1 proportion. For every rebellious living entity, there are 3 other. I guess that's an improper comparison. But the point here I'm trying to make is that we're outnumbered. There are more devotees than living entities in the material world, conditioned souls. So we're already so small, and compared to the entourage of Lord Krishna, we're even smaller. But how do we become recognized by the Lord? By taking shelter of the pure devotee of the Lord. By becoming Gopi Bhartur Padakamalayor Dasa Dasa Anudasa. By becoming servant of the servant, then we are recognized by the Lord. But this completely challenges our material mentality. Because our mentality is you must become big, you must become great, you must become so effulgent, so powerful and, how to say it, become prominent in society to be able to be recognized by the rest of the world. You need to become that number 1 to be able to be recognized. But Krishna consciousness is not like that. Even if you try to become that number 1, like the waves of the ocean come and go, just like a sandcastle is created and then crushed by the waves of the ocean, similarly that position of number 1 simply appears and disappears. There's a constant struggle for one to be the most richest. There's a constant struggle for one to be the most beautiful. But Krishna always has that position as being the most. Sada Aishwarya Purna. As yesterday's purport mentions, by his 6 transcendental opulences, he maintains all for their ultimate happiness. May he be merciful towards me so that I, as before, may be empowered with the introspection to create, for I am also one of the surrendered souls who are dear to the Lord. So this aspect of surrender is very important. But who do we surrender to? Gopi Bhartur Padakamalayor Dasa Dasa Anudasa. We seek the servant of the Lord. We never directly approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are a few reasons for that, and one reason Prabhupada often mentions is that we should not become too familiar with the spiritual master or the Supreme Personality of Godhead in His deity form. Because then we become more prone to make offenses, to consider them to be equal to us, when in fact they are much superior to us. So that's one reason. It's not just etiquette, but it's also about consciousness. But we take shelter of the devotee of the Lord, because the devotee of the Lord has been empowered by the Lord Himself to appear before us and give us Krishna Bhakti. Because Krishna is within the heart. Krishna is present within the heart as the Super Soul. Hridesha Arjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. So there Krishna is mentioning that the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself is present within the heart of all living entities as the Super Soul. And He is guiding the living entities who are as if seated on the chariot of the body, moving around in material universe. So the Supreme Personality Godhead as the Super Soul is the one that gives the mercy to the living entities in the form of His instructions. Tesham Sattva Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yenamam Upayanti Te. He gives to those who are Bhajatam Priti Purvakam, those who are engaged in His service wholeheartedly for His pleasure. He gives them instructions on how to extricate themselves or get out of material existence. But for us living entities who are conditioned by material modes of nature, who are attached to the Kali Yuga delights, for us we very easily neglect and ignore the Lord's instructions within the heart. So therefore He has to appear externally. He's within and without as the spiritual master. Within as the Super Soul, and without or external as the devotee, pure devotee of the spiritual master. And the spiritual master guides us back home, back to Godhead, to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So this is our position, servant of the servant of the servant. And therefore Mahaprabhu emphasizes so much that Trinadapi Sunichena, Tarorapi Saheshna, Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. If we just simply follow these things, that we remain humbler than a blade of grass, tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and if we consider all others respectable and expect no respect from others, naturally we'll be able to chant the holy name of the Lord. In other words, we'll be engaged in the service of the Lord. In that way, we'll always be engaged in the service of the Lord. As I mentioned, ahoituki apratihata. Apratihata is the same as sada Trinadapi Sunichena, Tarorapi Saheshna, Amanina Manadena, Kirtaniya Sadahari. Apratihata and Kirtaniya Sadahari, they are non-different. Apratihata means continuously, without cessation. Kirtaniya Sadahari. Sada means always, constantly. So if we follow these things, then we'll be able to access the mercy of the Lord to always remain servant of the servant. And in this way, Lord Brahma is praying that he remain the servant of the servant, instead of becoming puffed up by false prestige, thinking himself the creator. And this is the biggest problem we experience in material existence. We consider ourselves the proprietor. We consider ourselves the enjoyer. And we consider ourselves the best well-wishing friend of society, of all other living entities. But actually we are not. Krishna is the well-wishing friend of all living entities. Krishna is the proprietor. And Krishna is the benefactor of all sacrifices. This is the peace formula Prabhupada says. So, once we understand that, naturally we'll become peaceful and we'll be able to perform our activities of devotional service very easily for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if we wish to take credit for everything that's performed by us, naturally we'll be disturbed in mind. Because the way it works is that sometimes we'll be respected and adored, and in other times we'll be disrespected and criticized. This is the duality of material existence. There is not one without the other. In fact, when one takes credit for something they have not performed, naturally one will not be recognized for the actual activity they've performed. So in this way, Lord Narad Muni tells Vyasadeva that actually tasyeva heta prayateta kovido, that all these learned persons, they understand that just as happiness, just as distress comes of its own accord, without you wanting it, so does happiness. So therefore, why endeavor so hard for it? Rather, try to get out of material existence. Develop the happiness that you'll eternally be happy. Develop that happiness, which will ensure you always to be happy, rather than the temporary material existence. Therefore, Krishna mentions, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adi antavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. That those who are intelligent, Buddha, one who have intelligence, or enlightened, those who are enlightened with intelligence, those persons understand that material happiness is those activities that are engaged in trying to achieve material happiness is simply pregnant with material desires or material distress, rather. Beginning, middle and end, simply full of distress. And if you go into the spiritual realm of things, this is much more interesting. If you become a jnani or a speculator, that also is difficult and troublesome in the beginning. Troublesome in the middle. And in the end, if you want to come to Krishna consciousness, this mentality of trying to see the Supreme Lord as an impersonal blob or some all-pervading existence without any form becomes a impediment in understanding Krishna's Sri Vigraha, in understanding his form. So you can see that unless one takes to devotional service, one is not in an absolute position. One will not be completely happy always, at all time. And so Lord Brahma understands to be able to be in that position, one needs to perform devotional service in a humble state of mind. So here Brahma is mentioning this to Lord Krishna, that I thus may be able to give up the false prestige of being the creator. It's very interesting how this mentality comes up, because if you actually think about it, what do we control? What is actually within our power? What exactly are we doing? Or what exactly do we have within our power to be able to control? Everything we get, we have to endeavor so hard to get a little bit of money. And that money we have to go and purchase it from someone else. So we're constantly dependent. Prabhupada says, the dharma of the living entity is to be servant. The dharma or the swadharma of the living entity is always to be servant of the servant. And Prabhupada gives the example of how if one is in a job, one is servant to the boss. One must carry out the instructions of the boss. Otherwise one won't get paid. One has to be a servant in one's dealings with others. One always compromises one's desires to be able to be engaged in a relationship. And if one is not in a relationship, one gets a cat or a dog and serves the cat or a dog. If they don't even do that, ultimately everyone is just simply serving their senses, the dictates of the mind and the senses. We can't even control ourselves to stop that unless we take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we are always servant. So we must use this propensity of being servant properly and become servant of the devotees and servant of the Lord. And in this way we'll always remain happy and peaceful, and we'll understand our position in Krishna consciousness and serve the Lord in our proper position, of the proper consciousness. And this is how we'll give Krishna the topmost pleasure. Because that's the purpose of our existence, to give Krishna pleasure. We are Anandamaya Bhyasat, and so is the Lord. And He is existing in His ever blissful position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead with His internal potency. And He's enjoying in Goloka Vrindavan with all His cowherd friends. But still, He desires to engage in a loving relationship with us. And so therefore, our position is to always engage in His service for His pleasure as servant of the servant. Now, the next point here mentioned by Brahma is that his activities are always enacted through his internal potency, Rama. So here, Lord Brahma is again emphasizing how Krishna is beyond material existence. Krishna is not affected by material existence. Krishna is in touch with the material existence, but he's not affected. Rather, he's always in touch with his internal potency, and he's always engaged in that pastime or loving reciprocation. In a couple of purports before, I really love this point Prabhupada mentioned, that just as Krishna is performing Rasa Leela with his cowherd girlfriends in Vrindavan, Similarly, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu is performing his Rasalila with his external energy. So for the devotees, whether it's a battlefield of Kurukshetra or whether it's a loving pastimes in the pasturing grounds of Vrindavan, the devotees are always engaged in hearing the pastimes of the Lord. The devotees don't make a distinction like the foolish intelligent, or rather not intelligent, the foolish men who want to take credit for everything. For the foolish persons who immediately jump to understanding the intimate pastimes of the Lord. They are not so foolish. Rather, they understand the spiritual absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. Krishna's killing the demons and Krishna's kissing his cowherd girlfriends. They're of the same spiritual caliber. And so Prabhupada mentions that when a devotee reads the battlefield of the Kurukshetra of Bhagavad Gita, they can feel the same ecstasy as hearing the pastimes of the Lord in Braja. They can still feel ecstasy. As we can see in the example of the illiterate Brahmana, that he felt, just see, that here is Arjuna, his devotee, and out of affection for Arjuna, this supreme person has become the servant of Arjuna. Just see how much affection the Lord shows for his devotees. So in the same way, one can feel that ecstasy. So we can understand Krishna's pastimes if they're like that. What to speak of Krishna? If we go one step further, this is the Damodarmas. How is it that Krishna is running away from Yashoda Mai's stick when he is the Supreme Lord and fear itself, fear personified, fears Krishna? The sun provides its light and heat out of fear for Krishna. The winds blow out of fear for Krishna. All the demigods perform their activities out of fear of Krishna. But why is it that this small boy, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, why is Gopinath running away from Mother Yashoda, who's just simply showing a stick? He can break the stick, right? What is that stick? Just give me the stick, he'll break it. But no, he doesn't do that. He's reciprocating with his devotees. He's choosing that servant position to reciprocate with his devotees, to increase the relationship, the love and the attraction between them. That Krishna is worshipped by great sages who give up material existence, who give up janma, mrityu, jara, vyadi, birth, death, old age and disease. They give up ahara nidra, bhaya maityanam cha. They give up eating, sleeping, mating and defending to worship Krishna. So how is it that those living entities, say for example like Shukadev Goswami, have given up all of these material aspects of life, who've given up material conditioning to accept the service and the lotus feet of Krishna? How is it then Krishna can be affected by material existence then? It's not logical. Because if you have to give up material existence to attain Krishna's lotus feet, it means Krishna's transcended the material position. He's not affected by material nature. So therefore his pastimes are not affected by material nature. And so therefore we should always understand that the credit for wonderful creations must go to Krishna. Sarva karana karanam, he is the cause of all causes. Ekam sena stito jagat, simply by fragment of his potency, he's maintaining or sustaining material existence. So this is Krishna's position. And Prabhupada is saying here, by spiritual consciousness only can one be freed from the contamination of material affection and receive the benedictions offered by the Lord. So here's one last point I'll mention. Bhogashvarya prasaktanam taya parhita chetasam vavasayatmika buddhi samadho na vidhiyate. That if one is attached to bhoga, material enjoyment, and aishwarya, material opulence, then the resolute determination to perform devotional service will not take place. Bhogashvaya prasaktanam taya parhita chetasam. When one's heart is completely absorbed in wanting to get material resources, wanting to enjoy them. Bhoga and aishwarya prasaktanam taya parhita chetasam. Vavasayatmika buddhi, the resolute determination, samadho na vidhiyate, does not manifest. They are not able to engage in devotional service to the Lord with that aihoitaki apratihata, with that mood of no ulterior motive, only for Krishna's pleasure and without cessation. Rather, the material desires constantly cause them disruption in their service, and their mentality is, let me serve Krishna so that maybe he may give me this. Maybe so that he may give me that. I put 5 cents in hundi, now I require $5 billion. So that mentality comes from the desire or the attachment to material enjoyment. And one who is contaminated by such material affection, they cannot receive the benedictions offered by the Lord. Because the benedictions given by the Lord is of a spiritual nature. And what benediction does the Lord give? He gives love for Himself. And He doesn't give Himself so easily. Unless a person who's eligible to get that mercy, like Mother Yashoda, completely sold out, 100% servant of Damodar. She is holding the stick not for her own ego. She is holding the stick thinking that if I don't correct this boy now, he'll grow up to be a thief. He'll grow up to be an improper person in society. So I must correct him now so he'll never do it again. Her mentality is for the well-being of her son, her Lala. She's just simply thinking of Krishna. And prior to that, she puts Krishna down and goes and tends to the overflowing milk on the stove. And Prabhupada says, yes, there are situations when one must be intelligent enough to understand the priorities in service. Mother Yashoda knew that this milk on the stove will give Krishna more pleasure. That's her mentality. And Krishna reciprocated with her by breaking the pot. She was churning to increase the loving attraction, the intense affection, the reciprocation between both of them. And how and why? Because Mother Yashoda, being the topmost in the Vatsalya Ras, she has no material affection. She has no attachment for her own pleasure. She is simply thinking of Krishna's pleasure. She is collecting milk from Nanda Baba's cows, those special cows that only eat special grass. She is collecting the milk. She's sending all her servants away. She's taking so much labor to take and churn the milk into yogurt and butter. She's taking so much endeavor to chase after Krishna, to tie Krishna, to give up her false ego and to request help from others to tie Krishna. Simply for the pleasure of Krishna, not for her own enjoyment. So we can take note of the intense devotional service that is required to get the benediction of the Lord. So then we'll immediately think, what's our position? We don't even have an iota, a small fraction of devotion to the Lord. What is our hope? Our hope is the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. If we simply take to the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, we'll go back to Godhead. We'll re-establish the dormant hidden or the dormant desires of the dormant loving propensity for Krishna within the heart. Just simply by taking shelter of Prabhupada's instructions, we'll be able to understand our original position. Because Prabhupada is the Senapati Bhakta, the commander-in-chief of Lord Chaitanya's army, in Mahaprabhu's army. So naturally, if we please Prabhupada, Mahaprabhu will be pleased, and Mahaprabhu will immediately give us the elevator, the ticket back home, back to Godhead. And we'll be able to engage in service to Radha Gopinath. So we must always remember that. And what's Prabhupada's principle? Prabhupada says in so many letters, if you just simply chant Hare Krishna 16 rounds daily, if you follow the 4 regulative principles strictly, and you follow the instructions of the spiritual master, you will go back to Godhead within this lifetime. Within this lifetime, you go back to Godhead. But we don't take that ticket so cheaply. It's like having a ticket but not boarding the plane. We must make the endeavor to board the plane. So we engage in devotional service wholeheartedly with full endeavor. And this is our expression of humility, our expression of love for the Lord. That regardless of whatever may happen, we may slip, we may trip, we always come back to the service of the Lord with full vigor and engage in more service for the Lord to please Prabhupada even more. And naturally, we'll come to that stage of ahoituki apratihata, that we'll perform devotional service without any ulterior motive, and we'll perform devotional service without any cessation, only for the pleasure of Krishna at all places, at all times. And that's what Brahma is praying for. That during my activity of creation, let me always just simply remember that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, you are doing everything. You're just simply using me as an instrument to do this. So let me not become puffed up and always remain humble. And later on, we'll also see Lord Brahma again offers prayers in this way to Lord Krishna in the Brahma Vimohana Lila. Krishna puts Brahma in such a bewildered situation, and Lord Brahma again prays to the Lord. Actually, I'm so insignificant, I've made a mistake, please forgive me, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To teach us, through his devotee, how to always remain humble. Okay, you made the mistake of trying to challenge the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, come back to your original position. Again, take up Krishna consciousness with full vigor. Let bygones be bygones and continue performing devotional service with full vigor. Okay, so I'll end here. I have time for maybe a question or so. Any yes, Prabhu.
Just thinking about the concept you're explaining about honor and criticism.
Yep.
So what is the best way to deal with honor and criticism?
I like to always remember this one thing. Prabhupada mentions in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He mentions there that the devotee of the Lord, in the purport, where Prabhupada talks about Narad Muni being the Muni, and how Muni means what, you're not known as a Muni unless you differ from the argument or the thought of another. There in that purport, Prabhupada writes that this duality of happiness and distress, which is similar as honor and dishonor, because dishonor gives us dishappiness, or distress, and happiness, and honor gives us happiness, subtly. So then, Prabhupada says, whenever happiness comes to us, we pray to the Lord that, actually I don't deserve this, but you're so kind that you've given it to me, so let me engage in devotional service more. And any distress comes, the mood is that, actually I deserve so much more worse, but you've reduced it. So please, thank you so much, and you continue with your devotional service in that way. So in the same way, with honor and dishonor, I always try to remember this, like when you do book distribution, that's the biggest thing that gets hurt, the ego. That, I've come out here to save you. How can you reject? But rather, you should always remember and understand that you're just simply a servant, an instrument of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Results don't matter to you. Whatever comes of its own accord. And you just simply take that without getting affected and move on. That I'm just taking this to purify myself. That someone honors me, I just simply give that to Prabhupada and through my spiritual master and the Parampara. It goes to Krishna. Any disrespect, I just tolerate it because it came because of my bad past activities. And it's just simply such a small amount. I should be suffering in hell eternally, but what I'm getting is just a small fragment. And people will think this mentality as being an escapist, a negative, pessimistic mentality. Actually, this is a mentality of gratitude. It's a gratitude of humility. Because actually you do deserve worse. We exist in material existence for so much lifetimes neglecting Krishna. We deserve so much worse. But in Kali Yuga, in the worst possible time, Krishna has given us an opportunity to engage in devotional service. So like this, the mind should always bring back to the gratitude for Krishna's merciful nature and how much worse we should deserve, but we've been given so much that we don't.